Thank you, everyone. This hearing of the Senate Caucus on International Narcotics Control will come to order. I'm delighted to have this panel of witnesses here from various sectors of the federal government to look at the Precursor Pipeline. Precursor chemicals are building blocks used to manufacture fentanyl and other synthetic drugs. They're difficult to regulate because they're often perfectly legal for certain uses. Chinese chemical suppliers and Mexican drug cartels exploit the situation. Rather than supplying, for instance, fentanyl directly to the U.S. as they once did, Chinese chemical companies now supply the precursor chemicals to Mexican cartels and transnational criminal organizations, specifically Jalisco New Generation and Sinaloa. The cartels then use their own chemists to manufacture the fentanyl to distribute to victims in the United States. The motive, of course, is always money. The authors of the recent Financial Action Task Force report titled "Money Laundering from Fentanyl and Synthetic Opioids" put it succinctly. Taking the profits out of synthetic opioid trafficking is one of the most effective ways to address a growing transnational crime and public health emergency. That's why I prioritize attacking the financial networks of the criminal cartels. I'm pleased by the State Department's announcement that it will appoint a synthetic drugs envoy to tackle the synthetic drugs and precursor chemical markets. But as co-chairman Grassley and I have warned in this letter, which without objection I will put into the record to Secretary Blinken, if this envoy is to be effective, he or she must target the financial networks of these illicit conglomerates. Currently, cartels and other actors easily launder funds into, through, and out of the United States. Without coordination, federal agencies won't have a true understanding of the magnitude of the money laundering problem in the United States or the ability to gauge whether our countermeasures against the cartels are effective. Senator Grassley requested to hold this hearing, and for good reason. It is past time we recognize that only through bipartisan intergovernmental cooperation can we sever the financial arteries that empower cartels and finance the precursor chemicals trade. That is why I introduced an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act to establish a cross-border financial crime center that would operationalize FATF recommendations. It would coordinate across all federal agencies, investigations, and information sharing related to financial crimes with a nexus to the U.S. border, ensure uniform training is provided to United States and as appropriate foreign law enforcement agencies, build the capacity of foreign law enforcement and private sector partners to combat money laundering, establish domestic public-private partnerships to help real-time sharing of money laundering trends and techniques, and strengthen international information sharing agreements, including import-export trade data. I'm pleased that Homeland Security Investigations included this center as part of its strategy for combating illicit opioids. Let's borrow from playbooks that have already achieved success. In a single day, the U.S. sanctioned more than 150 entities aiding Russia in its unprovoked war against Ukraine. Treasury briefed my staff that between January and May of 2023, only 87 targets associated with the illicit fentanyl trade were sanctioned. Sanctions hit the cartels in their funding and restrict their access to the United States. Let's apply the sanctions playbook to the U.S. overdose crisis, which caused 110,000 deaths, including 434 Rhode Islanders, in 2022. Chinese money laundering organizations use mirror payment schemes to avoid cross-border transactions and launder cartel cash right here in the United States. We need to make the geographic targeting orders permanent, extend anti-money laundering safeguards to investment advisors, and push towards a complete and timely implementation of the Corporate Transparency Act. And by the way, much appreciation to Senator Grassley for his terrific cooperation in getting that Corporate Transparency Act passed into law. Each day that we delay, fentanyl dealers launder ill-gotten gains through the U.S. financial system. Pushing countries like China and Mexico to take swift action is also key. That is why Co-Chair Grassley and I have pressed China, most recently in May, to increase information sharing on precursor chemicals, strengthen the enforcement of labeling laws, and implement and enforce Know Your Customer laws. Each of these asks is consistent with international treaties and guidance and could help reduce the flow of precursor chemicals from China to Mexico and fentanyl from Mexico into our country. In recent years, U.S. law enforcement collaboration with Mexican counterparts has declined significantly. I urge all relevant agencies to redouble their efforts to prevent transborder crime and pursue the criminal organizations' finance networks, as laid out in the U.S.-Mexico Bicentennial Framework for Security, Public Health, and Safe Communities. In closing, I'll take a moment to remember Dianne Feinstein. Senator Feinstein served as both the chair and co-chair of this caucus at different points for 13 years. The caucus accomplished much under her leadership, and she had a clear passion for reducing the number of overdose deaths in our country. We are all honored to have served with her on this caucus, and we take a moment to remember her right now. I yield to my co-chair, Senator Grassley, after which I'll introduce the witnesses, and you may then proceed with your statements.